makes the X-Men the X-Men? It's a question that's oft pondered whenever there's a large shift in the status quo. It's also a question that some have regarding Ultimate X-Men from 2024 by Peach Momoko. Now, in all fairness, only issue 1 is out time of recording, so that's all we have to look at. But regardless, it's an interesting discussion. Marvel Comics has used late 2023 leading into 2024 to do an Ultimate Comics relaunch, kinda sorta. It's more a retooling of the Ultimate Universe concept. While the series in question bear the same name, they do not take place in the same universe as the original Ultimate canon. Those stories took place on Earth 1610. These stories take place on Earth 6160. Now, they are linked, as this new universe has been shaped by the Maker, the villainous Reed Richards of Earth 1610, who through his machinations has shaped this world as best he can to halt the rise of superheroes, creating a network of allies through which he can control the world. Although, it's not necessarily going the best for him. They're rising up anyway. Now, the original Ultimate Universe debuted in the year 2000. It was largely an attempt to boost sales and garner a new audience, and was felt by some before they launched this that one of the reasons that people were leaning away from Marvel is because the continuity was too much. It was intimidating. It was keeping new fans out. One of the ideas pitched was actually an entire Marvel-wide universe reboot a la DC Comics' Crisis on Infinite Earths. But instead, the decision was made to launch a separate imprint, and so the 1610 universe was born. Here, the characters could be repackaged and represented. Familiar stories and people could have new backstories and happenings. There could be twists on familiar beats. And for a time, it did well. Eventually, the universe's popularity would fade, and it too would garner a host of continuity, as is the way. It would eventually be collapsed in 2015's Secret Wars event, though some characters, very few, survived and were rolled into the main 616, such as Miles Morales and of course the Maker. But that story left off with it being said that those universes could be / were being remade. Reed and his family off in space doing things. Now, some don't enjoy that this current crop of series share the same name, as they feel that this is a separate entity and to label it the same is kind of misleading, or that it could be confusing, while others aren't too bothered or feel that it is fitting as while it isn't that same universe, it's leading out of events that happened there. So far, time of recording, the universe has been well received, with particular praise being heaped upon Ultimate Spider-Man. We discussed the first issue here on this channel. I'll leave a link down below. The one that has left some in some corners with a bit more of a polarized view, although not too much, but still discussion being had, is Ultimate X-Men. We're going to take a look at it and discuss why that is. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and let's take a look at Ultimate X-Men #1 from 2024. Ultimate X-Men #1 was released on March 6th of 2024. It was written and illustrated by Peach Momoko with script adaptation by Zach Davison. Just an amusing fact, Momoko can mean Peach Girl, so in a way the pseudonym is Peach Peach, which makes me smile. It's a pun. Puns are big in Japan. It's the way the language is written. You can see them visually. I think they're funnier that way. Now, the opening page gives an overview as to where the story is thus far, as they tend to. But in the case of this, where the story sits in regards to the overall Marvel universe is useful, as aside from this opening and the main character used, there were going to be very little inklings that this is in any way connected, at least in issue 1. The overview reads, a diabolical genius known as the Maker used time travel to create his ideal Earth by systematically preventing anyone from ever becoming a superhero and establishing a secret council of supervillains that rules the world from the shadows. But recently, the Maker was locked away in a place called the City, and now the Maker's council works to further exercise their influence on the world, including Sunfire, Viper, and Silver Samurai, who oversee the eastern territory of Hinokuni, the land of the sun. There, a young girl named Hisako Ichiki is about to find her life changed forever. Hisako Ichiki is Armor, who in the main 616 debuted in Astonishing X-Men #4 in 2004. She was created by Joss Whedon and John Cassaday. Her powers can be loosely defined as psionic exoskeleton. So this story in the Ultimate Universe focuses on her and the manifestation of her powers. This is she deals with guilt and depression over the death of a friend, and what seems to be potentially a burgeoning curse, for there is a mysterious demon-like entity haunting her. The story begins at her graduation from middle school, which she has not been attending over much. I thought I should at least show up for my graduation. Our opening lets the audience learn about how Hisako is regarded, which is as an outcast, which is fitting seeing as this is the X-Men. People find her off-putting, particularly because she's withdrawn and is depressed. Now, at this ceremony, a girl rushes up to her for she's being given a second button, which is a big deal in Japanese school culture. It does happen during certain graduations, and it's a way for a boy to ask a girl to be his girlfriend or to confess that he likes her and also please be my girlfriend. This issue does briefly explain this at the end, alongside some of the other cultural symbols used, as this issue, much like Momoko's other work for Marvel, is very heavily steeped in her Japanese heritage. It's Marvel from a Japanese perspective. This reads and feels like a manga, from the art style to the narrative conventions and tropes used. Now, when Hisako looks for who gave her the button, the boy is gone, but the button has a small note inside of it. Meet me at the temple on the mountain behind the school. Our time has come, my friend. A call from her mother lets us know a bit more about Hisako's life, that she's often left alone or with her grandma, so she has a bit of a lonely existence. This because her mom has to work late, which she also has to do later on in the issue, so we say that this is a bit of a common occurrence. With nothing else to do, and who wouldn't be curious, she goes to the shrine. There she spots a tree that has some flowers and gifts piled before it, but she sees a young man. What's wrong with me? I'm seeing things. She's more disturbed by that than by the shadowy figure who next approaches and talks to her. Many feel that this is the Shadow King. I'm always down for more Shadow King. The Shadow has been looking to meet her and says that it was connected with her friend. It even gives her a gift that had been given to her by her friend, the same boy she had just seen by the tree, revealed to be a vision from her past.
So you do remember Tsubasa. I'm sure that would please him. But then you were friends. After all, did you know I was close to Tsubasa too?
Her friend Tsubasa was being bullied, and he eventually killed himself, something that Hisako blames herself for. As while she was his friend, she did look away as things got worse and worse. This story handles this fairly tastefully. It keeps a lot of it to the shadows, though it does pull from it for some of the horror imagery that will occur later on. Later deaths and some of the other imagery will make it clear that he hanged himself. That'll be relevant for the curse as it comes into play. Momoko did state that she wanted to play with some body horror, and some of it starts here. It's not very overt. It's seemingly going to get more overt later on based on some of these samples shown, but there is a bit of it with the shadowy antagonist. It's unsettling.
I quit running from my problem. My eyes are open. The time for sorrow is over. Now is the time for vengeance.
Now, there is a decent amount of horror imagery on display in this scene, particularly if you're familiar with Japanese horror. This straw doll talisman, you see this in a horror story, you run. No good can come of it. Same with hair. And if there's hair inside of the doll, you had a good run. This panel of Hisako seeing Tsubasa gazing down at her, his head tilted at the angle it would have been hanging from the tree, is excellent. Why are you running away? You're the one who told me not to run. As Hisako flees, she stops paying attention and bikes out right in front of a car. As it barrels down towards her, her gifts manifest, taking the shape of the gift Tsubasa had given her. From that moment on, she knows that her life has changed and she can't hide any longer. Something's going on and she wants to know what. She bikes back down to the shrine and leaves flowers at Tsubasa's death site. Once more, she encounters the Shadow.
Hisoka, this will be easier if you join me.
This isn't about Tsubasa's death at all. That's just your excuse. Why don't you tell me what you really want from me?
Why would you say that?
As she is attacked, once more her powers manifest, and while she cowers, her powers are a bit more active. They repel the shadow and even manage to grab it. There are some hints here if you're familiar with Armor and her powers, since her powers are psionic, so they're psychic based, and since she's grabbing the shadow, that leads into the idea that it is the Shadow King and this a projection is manifesting himself out there. Maybe he's trapped in the astral plane again. Although based on some of the things that Momoko stated about not pulling from X-Men lore, maybe not.
Here's a little secret. My curse is already in motion, and the first victim is someone you know.
Shut up! If that head had exploded, we'd be in classic Ultimate Marvel territory. People's heads exploding like grapes, people being eaten. Now once more she sees Tsubasa, but this time he speaks to her, telling her it's too late. She then gets a call letting her know that his coach was killed, and that he was one of the people who bullied him, so it seems like the curse is underway. Also, he died by hanging himself. The comic says hung, but that's a common grammatical error that people make. You hung up clothes, a person hanged themselves. It's such a little thing, but it's a hill I'll die on. That distinction, seeing the way it's written, instantly lets you know what happened if you utilize it properly. And so the issue ends with Hisako wondering just what is happening. It feels like all our sins, all the dark secrets we hid away, some cruel power has torn off the lid, let it all out. What is that shadow? And why do I keep feeling this energy protecting me? What do you want from me? This issue is very simple but solid. When you do something basic, it leaves little room for error. There's nowhere to hide if something is mishandled or poorly executed. And this does everything it needs to, and it does it well. We learn who Hisako is, why she feels insecure, how others view her, a little bit about her home life. We meet the antagonist, her powers manifest, and we get a couple of mysteries to explore and expand upon. Who is the Shadow? Why is he seeking her out? What was his connection to her friend? She needs to learn about her powers and assumedly the X-Men. For some, in terms of tropes and storytelling conventions, it may feel a bit too familiar, particularly if they read a lot of manga. And some may feel that there's just been an X-Men coat of paint applied, while for others, they may feel that there's not enough X-Men elements at all. The light supernatural / horror elements are making it stand out a little bit, but again, not too much. They are fun though, and the way the shadow is drawn is interesting. I like the little tendrils. The way they're playing with the shadow seeming supernatural, but it's most likely going to be some form of psychic attack is very interesting. So now let's discuss. This story leans into Japanese mythology and culture and tropes, and there are a few X-Men references. For some, that has led them to feel that this is too far removed or just doesn't feel like an X-Men comic, and that even though it's the first issue, there should be more. Momoko is very much putting her own spin on what's happening, which is what she was asked to do. Just as she was asked to present the Marvel Universe through the lens of Japanese folktales when Marvel editor C.B. Cebulski had her do that for Demon Days. She stated as much. I have some quotes. Some are translated from Japanese with the help of her husband and manager, others aren't, or they don't seem to be. On her history with the X-Men, she stated, I wasn't too familiar with X-Men before researching them when I created Demon Days, and now Ultimate X-Men, but I generally always love the concept of mutants using their powers for and against humankind as well as each other, and that they are generally treated as outcasts from society. And getting to write the Ultimate X-Men how that came about, she stated, or rather her husband stated as he's relaying this part of the story, it was very random. CB Cebulski just kind of called us and we stepped out of the studio. CB sat me and Peach down. CB suddenly asked, do you want to take a break from the Demon series? We were like, whatever, fine. We will take a break. We thought it was a break from interiors. But then he said, well then, would you like to do Ultimate X-Men? So it was just very random. We said okay, and we didn't know what Ultimate X-Men was at the time, but we knew it was a big project. And CB told us Jonathan Hickman and all the other big projects both in the past and current, and we were both like it sounded interesting, and Peach likes the X-Men, so we said okay. These interviews are really interesting because they give good insight into Momoko's headspace going into the series. Also, it shows how the concept was presented to her and what she was asked to do. The way it was pitched to her, it appears that it was presented as that she could do pretty much what she wanted. She stated, it is a bigger shared universe with other creatives, but I feel like I'm still kind of independent. Jonathan and CB kind of just let me do whatever. They just gave me What If X-Men, but in Japan, but with a whole new roster of X-Men, not Wolverine, not Cyclops, not the popular ones. That's why it's Hisako, Armor, and more centrally Japanese. Although it's shared, but because there's not too much that overlaps between Hickman's story and my story, I kind of believe that Jonathan Hickman chose me to just go wild with how I wanted to tell the story. The thing is, while this approach is going to land with some, especially since this is the X-Men, so you have a bit more room to play with different mutants, different origins, different coming into their powers, and this is meant to be a new take on the X-Men because it's a different universe. The maker reshaped the world and all that. For some, it's going to be too far off base from what they were hoping for. For some, the appeal of the entire Ultimate X-Men concept is seeing reworkings of characters they're more familiar with. Or if not, they don't want the base to be moved too far off. Different, but not that different. So for some, it's just too much of a shift. For me, it works, but I can see why for others it wouldn't. As for choosing Armor as the lead, Momoko stated, I was just looking through Japanese X-Men characters and saw Armor as a very interesting character to explore. I never write a story first and decide on character. I always choose a character and let the character tell their story to me. Hisako is a character who has a decent amount of room to play, and given her heritage and the fact that the story was going to be Japanese themed, it makes sense why Momoko would gravitate towards her, especially given her age as a younger mutant and those are the types of stories that she likes to play in. There is an authenticity to this story and how it incorporates the culture, and just that coming of age tale is something that many enjoy. For some, that familiarity, but mixed with that other culture, is gonna feel comforting and interesting. The thing is, there's not gonna be a lot of X-Men history pulled into it. This based on what Momoko herself has stated, although to what degree remains to be seen. My Ultimate X-Men isn't directly influenced by classic X-Men stories. I like to believe CB and Jonathan Hickman chose me because they wanted something completely new and different. So I think sometimes no influences is a good thing. A statement like this is probably why it's a good thing that Ultimate X-Men is a separate book and not a mainline book. The X-Men have a rich and exciting history. That is one of the X-Men's strengths, and how that history has been built upon has been another strength. Now that statement doesn't mean that nothing will be taken, and Momoko has of course researched the X-Men as she herself stated, but that's not the focus. Her take is the focus. It remains to be seen if that will be a strength or weakness as the series goes on. So when a statement is made where it seems like the focus is going to lie elsewhere, for some that will grate. And that is part of why this may feel so dissonant from other X titles or just other titles in this Ultimate line. It is different, but again, this is how it appears the project was pitched to her. She's delivering upon what was asked and delivering well. For a new take Ultimate book, it could work. But then the question becomes, what about what happens when other characters come in? Or will they just not connect or be more loosely connected? Will it always kind of float a bit separately? How does that make the book work in an overall lineup in a shared universe? For this, Earth may be smaller on a company level, but it's still shared. So there are questions to be asked, although some will be answered over time. Now for some, it must be stated that it's just the art style. They can't get past it. It's different for them. And again, that's just aesthetics. Some feel there should be more of a universal house style for Marvel overall, while others feel it's not that big a deal. So there's a lot around this one. I can see why there's discussion surrounding it, but on the whole, the comic itself as presented is a very solid piece. It's well done. I'm excited to see where it goes. Momoko has given lots of interviews about direction, storylines, things that she's planning on, how she feels at their core the X-Men connect with adolescence and lots of problems that youth go through, plans to incorporate body horror, which I'm excited about but miles will vary, social media, a whole bunch of things. The thing is, not everyone is gonna seek out interviews and go looking for a whole bunch of extra information to see how and why something is presented the way it is. In fact, very few people will. So for most, they're gonna be left with what's in front of them. And for some, it will be an exciting fresh take, or if they're already fans of some manga or Momoko's work, it may be nice to see that format at Marvel. While for others, it may be too far removed or off-putting. Different strokes for different folks. I wanna hear from you. Where do you land on this story? Did you read it? Are you enjoying it? Body horror. How familiar do you feel a creator should be with characters before taking them on? Do you agree that sometimes a completely fresh set of eyes can be a good thing? I wanna hear from you. Share your thoughts down below. While you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time today spent discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.